How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. This is my video channel inspired by my Instagram channel, 1985 Road Dog. Basically, a story behind the photos is the concept. I've had a great response with my Instagram channel with all my photos of my time working in the music business, and also my stories from a fan's perspective. People really dig the photos, so I started this video channel basically to document it further before I forget these stories. At some point you start forgetting things, so I'm just documenting it all and getting it down. I spoke to somebody that wanted me to talk more about the Pearl Jam and the grunge thing coming into the tail end of the glam band, hair band type scene. So I was working at a club called Limelight in New York City, which was owned by one of the big club, the club king of New York, Peter Gatien, owned the Limelight. His other clubs were the Tunnel and the Palladium and Club USA. At one time or another, I worked in all four of his clubs, but I was at Limelight every Sunday for 7-8 years, steady. So I started working there around 1990. I was brought in by the promoter, Nicky, who also brought me into Raw. After seeing my club Hot Rocks on Long Island and how successful it was with that concept, he came to me and we did a club called Raw in Queens. And then Nicky was also promoting the Limelight on Sundays, Rock and Roll Church, and he brought me in as the DJ. So he wasn't just bringing a DJ at that point. He was bringing in somebody that had extensive contacts in the music business, record labels, management, things like that, to help get shows booked and to help get shows promoted or special things happen or special events happen through my connections in the music business. Nicky was a club guy. He really didn't have extensive music industry connections. So I brought that to the table as well as my skills as a DJ playing a rock dance format. So at one point, Limelight really started, really doing well on the Sunday night program. The attendance was really starting to boom based off of as a result of our promotional push and the concept of the rock dance club and the bands and the whole thing together. All of the promotion and all of the ideas really gelled, and it really started taking off. So, in any big city, or at least back then, there were different promoters, and they were all battling each other for shows. Who's going to get this show? Who's going to get that show? It was a lot of that. And now on the bigger level, the Madison Square Gardens and the big rooms, it was the big promoters of the time that ran those in New York City. Ron Delsner was one. John Scher, Metropolitan Entertainment, was another one. They booked the Garden and the Meadowlands and all the big rooms, Roseland, stuff like that. But, Limelight was a nightclub that held, 2,000-3,000 people. Limelight probably held about 2,800, if I can remember correctly. And there were other clubs like Limelight, other rooms, other promoters, other venues, other theaters, and they used to battle each other for these lower level shows or up and coming hot shows. So Nicky came to me one day and said, "Look, we got to make a statement. We got to book something. What should we have one shot." I think he was doing a deal with somebody big, maybe, I don't know, ICM, something. And he said, "Look, we have one shot to go after a really, hot show. And what'll happen is we'll probably really piss people off and we'll be burning bridges and we're going to start a war in the city by going after this show." Basically, we were going above our league to try to get a hot show and take it away from somebody else that had already thought they had it. So, I thought about it and I said, we need to go after Pearl Jam. Now, this is way before Pearl Jam got big with Alive and Jeremy and all that stuff. This was like, I got the test pressing or the demo CD or whatever of the record. And you got to remember, I've been DJing rock music now for, good solid 3 years. And I've been DJing as a whole in nightclubs since I'm 17, in 1978. So I'm well versed as a DJ. I had a good ear for music and songs and what was about to pop and be big. So I said, you have to go after Pearl Jam. And he was like, who's this? Pearl Jam? He never heard of him. He thought it was going to be, I don't know, go after something more obvious. I said, look, this is going to be a hot band. It's going to be a hot show. So he went after that band, Pearl Jam. He didn't never heard of them. I knew it was going to be big eventually. And, it was started a war. It took the show away from somebody else that had a working relationship with ICM and the manager. It was just like, there's so much drama behind the scenes in nightclubs as a rule in general. And now you've probably got 3 or 4 rooms and 3 or 4 promoters fighting for this Pearl Jam show. Anyway, we got the show. By the time, the tickets, we got the show was announced, the tickets went on sale. By the time that show actually happened was probably, I don't know, 2-3 months later, 2.5 months later, the actual show happened. By the time of the day of the show, it had sold out weeks and weeks ago. It was the hottest show in town. Epic Records had 1 million people there, press, if you've ever been in Limelight, it was a huge old church with levels and different levels you could kind of like close off and make different VIP things and private areas. And there were so many areas closed off. It was insane. You had to have a pass to move anywhere. It way oversold probably. And when Pearl Jam rolled in that afternoon for sound check, they were supposedly the new guard, the anti-rock star band, the anti-limousine band, the anti, drug use and drink use band, the anti, sleaze band. They were like, they portrayed themselves as being like angels coming down from heaven to save us from the masses of the low-life rock bands. That was their attitude then. So they roll in there, and they have their own monitor system, not PA system, on-stage monitors. Now, Limelight had a great PA. I mean, incredible. Peter Gatien, that's one thing about Peter Gatien and his clubs. He spent money where it mattered. He never chinched on sound and lights and sound techs and staff. He was always on the money with that stuff. Money well spent. He had a great PA there. Pearl Jam wanted their own monitors on stage. That's about as rock star a move as you can pull. We want our own monitors. Your monitors aren't good enough. That was a huge deal because the whole thing, our monitor board couldn't be moved. They had to put theirs in front of it, cut down on stage space. It was just, that was a nightmare. I think their whole backstage rider was like a case of beer. Like they were trying to be so anti-rock star, but by putting in your own monitors, it was like, every other band of bigger caliber than Pearl Jam that played Limelight used our monitors. So that just tells you something about them. So then when the show's about to go on, you couldn't move in there. I couldn't, the DJ booth at Limelight was 3 floors up into the top of the church. You had to go down 3 levels of stairs to get anywhere down to the floor, more or less a bathroom. And the DJ booth was fairly big up there, but there were so many people hanging out, record company people, friends of mine. I had to put like a little garbage can in the corner to pee. I mean, you couldn't leave. And everybody's smoking weed and drinking. It's a party at Limelight. It was a party at Limelight always. By that point in my life, I had stopped with any kind of powdered recreation, and I was just, smoking some weed, drinking a beer here or there, slowing down. Anyway, so Limelight had these giant cages that girls danced in. They had dancing girls in cages that hung from the ceiling of the church. So to get these girls in the cage was on a winch and pulley system. It was like it would lower to the dance floor from way up in the air. The girls would get in the cage, and then the cage would get pulled back up on the pulley, on a motor, and they would dance up in these cages. So Pearl Jam was about to take the stage. They would not go on stage until the girls got out of the cages. We don't demean women and all this stuff. So they were pulling that card. So in order to move this packed like sardines crowd out of the way enough to have this cage come from the ceiling and land on the dance floor so the girl could get out, that was a half-hour escapade. Security, moving people. That night was really, really crazy, and Pearl Jam took off from there. But we wouldn't have gotten that show if I wasn't asked to say, hey, who should we go for to make a statement? We need a statement show. And that was the statement show. Crazy night. Pearl Jam at Limelight. I want to say it was April 12th, 1992. And then either a week or two before or after that, LA Guns played Limelight. Hollywood Vampires. Pearl Jam was on the way up. LA Guns was back to playing clubs again on the Hollywood Vampires tour, and they played Limelight. Limelight was a great club. But again, Limelight had a lot of the grunge bands and rock rap bands and techno, electro, goth, industrial bands. The Rage Against the Machines, the Marilyn Mansons. But once that grunge scene came in and the glam hair metal scene went out, once that happened, the crowd now looks like the band on stage. That's the way I grew up, was the band on stage never looked like the crowd. You'd go see whoever, Aerosmith or Kiss, or even if it was, Leonard Skinner or a Southern rock band or ZZ Top or whoever, they didn't look like the audience, man. They had clothes that you couldn't buy in your local town. In this case of Kiss and Aerosmith and a lot of the bands of the 70s and of course the 80s had custom-made outfits, custom-made stuff you couldn't buy. So there was always a separation between the audience and who was playing on stage. You didn't look like the band on stage. That's what made it special and magical. So when the grunge thing came in with the combat boots and the cargo shorts and the flannel and all that crap, anybody in the audience could look like the band on stage, and it was, you were all in it together. The grunge bands. We're all the same, and we're not different, and we're not rock stars. That was the whole marketing ploy. Now, whether they all bought into it or not, all the bands, who knows? Nirvana were true, Cobain and his drug use and everything else. That was, Cobain rode in limousines and drank champagne and did heroin. You know what I mean? It's like, Pearl Jam were trying to be ultra holier than thou, and I didn't like that about them. Even though they made a great first album, I never really dug them after that first record. But that whole scene was like killed rock and roll to me. Rock and roll is more than just a sound or a guitar tone or a vocal style. Rock and roll is an attitude and a presentation, and once the audience started looking like the people on stage, it was over for me. It was like, yeah, there was still good music. There's a lot of good music that came out in the 90s and even into the early 2000s, but it's like, rock and roll is dead. Long live rock and roll. So, the grunge thing was quick. There was some good music came out of it. It shook things up, which needed to be. By the end of the hair metal, glam metal thing, there were bands that were just like copies of the copies of the copy. It was getting ridiculous. So it had to end somewhere. So it was good that grunge came along, and out of that came industrial and Nine Inch Nails, and Ministry started getting their due, and then you had the goth stuff and the Sisters of Mercy, and it just, and of course rock, rap, or nu metal, Anthrax and Public Enemy, and and then you got into the Rage Against the Machine and the Limp Bizkits, and it just rock and roll was over by that point, man. That's why I stress when there's any band that's around from the old days, go see them. I mean, if you've never seen the Rolling Stones and they play near you, you got to go see the Stones. If whoever's still playing out there, go see them. I went to see Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, the guy's 80-something years old. He played for about 20, 30 minutes, and his band played the rest of the show. But, I mean, he's Jerry Lee Lewis. I had to go see him. I'd never seen him. So, grunge kind of killed rock and roll, but it kind of needed killing because what rock and roll had come to represent was, matching leather suits and singing about cherry pies and stuff. So, I'm not knocking it. It's just grunge was a kick in the ass that glam and hair metal needed. But, it killed rock and roll. It's a catch-22. Anyway, thanks for listening. 1985 Road Dog. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Speak soon. Ciao.